cooperating online, working together as much as possible here in Vienna, and it's a shorter time as well. So you can see it's September 7 and 8 mainly, and you will work on then later with all these people. We have a topic of climate adaptation and mitigation in social housing. Of course, everybody is talking about these topics in these days, but it means that it's really important. We really have to go further and cooperate a lot on this. I'm happy that we can do this within the frame of an intermediate exhibition of IBA Vienna. We are just in the exhibition. When you came in, you could see some of the rooms. If you have time, you still can go through the whole exhibition later. And it shows examples, more than 100 projects that have been developed within the last years and are trying to show innovations in the topic of social housing in Vienna. So a warm welcome to all of you. Enjoy this evening. It will be streamed online, so you will be part of a wider community. And I hope that this will be also part of the success of the third research lab. I would like to hand over to Amila Širbegović. She's part of the IBA team and she will lead you through this evening today. Thank you.
Maybe some of you were here and are, you already know, you can take your masks off when you are sitting on your seats. So, and if you're leaving your seats, so please put them again on, because we are very, very happy that we are able to have these public discussions even in these times that we are living in, and we want to keep that for the next 7 weeks during our whole exhibition. Thank you very much for coming tonight, also to this place, and also taking part on the summer school and the IBA ResearchLab. I'm very happy and very exciting that we have this topic this year, because climate adaptation is something that became somehow a mainstream in the last years, but cooperating, working on that, integrating it into planning and social housing is also some of the challenges that are waiting for us. I will be your host, and I'm very excited because we also have great guests that we invited, that people who've been dealing with this subject really for last 10, 20 and more years. And we will start today with a summary from Christoph, Reinprecht and Simon Güntner. Some of you met them during the summer school. And follow with a movie that's been made during or for this summer school, and then go into the discussion with our guests. Thank you very much.
I don't know. Yeah, thank you very much for being hosted in the context of IBA, and also thank you very much, Kurt, for this warm welcoming, and Amila for your introduction, for introducing this evening. We are very happy that that the IBA give us the opportunity to create a cluster, so to say. That's our objective, a research cluster that overcomes the traditional distinction or barriers between technical and sciences and humanities, for example, social sciences sometimes in between. And this is especially important for us because Vienna is a city where the social housing issue is so strongly and so importantly anchored. And at the same time, the research on social housing is highly fragmented. So if we compare it with other important sites of research on housing, for example, London or Paris, there we have housing research institutions, many of them even, academic one. And of course, there are applied research institutions also in Vienna, Vienna-based and or associated with the non-profit organizations, which is very important. But what our interest is to take the IBA as an opportunity to go further and to try to bring into contact the research on social housing developed and carried out on different academic sites in Vienna. And of course, to relate it to the international debate, because there's a strong and in the last year increasingly intensive debate on social housing issues, because the housing issue is related with the question of affordability. And this is also something we discussed already in our, Simon will go into this in 1 minute. We discussed last year, for example. But the question of social housing is not only a question of affordability, it is a question how housing is framed, shaped in our societies as a a good which is not to be reduced to a commodity. And there is a long debate, a long struggle since 150 years maybe, since the famous Friedrich Engels text on the housing question, where the housing issue is in the center of societal struggles. And I think today, again, it is. Maybe not so in Vienna, because in Vienna we are in the comfortable situation that 60% of population is living in more or less regulated renting contexts or the situations. But it is also in Vienna challenged because, for example, the question of environment, the urban heating, the climate change is something we are all confronted, and especially in our living space. So these are issues we discussed yesterday and today, and we are continuing to discuss. And this is also something which is discussed on international levels. And we try to connect these debates in the context of our research lab. Simon.
Yeah, I just take over with the next slide, and to give thank you, Christoph, and to give you a little bit more of a background. So we started on invitation, actually, or as a co-production between Technical University, University of Vienna, and the City of Vienna in 2018. And I'm very happy that Rudi Scheuvens is also here, who is one of the brains behind the research lab. And we said the theme of the International Building Exhibition is new social housing. So let's take this as an overall frame to engage international discussion on what that could actually be over the next years between 2018 and 2022. And each year we're breaking this down in to a specific theme and do it by invitation. So we invite international guests. We issue a call for proposals. Last year we had 100 respondents and we selected 30. The year before it was about the same size. This year it was all a bit different. We come to this in a minute, and we invite international experts to engage with us. And we always look for a mix between people representing junior research, like PhD students, more senior academics, but also people representing the activist field, so people who are coming with their projects and present what they're doing out in the field. And we kicked off in 2018 with a look at the transformation of large-scale housing estates, which is a huge issue for the International Building Exhibition. And we discussed international examples, how retrofitting, how how social change and physical change actually come together, which challenges we have, and you know all about the challenges we have here in Vienna. And from that discussion in 2018, one of the things we took home and then to our internal discussions in Vienna was that the issue of the social is actually highly contested. We were in a room talking about different things, and we were asking ourselves, what is the social in social housing? So we used this very fundamental question as an overarching frame for last year's discussion, and asked and invited people to bring forward responses to the question, what is social about social housing? And if you go to the next slide. And in that discussion last year, one of the things that we discovered was that how exceptional the situation in Vienna is. That when you engage with people from Southern America, from Asia, they have the situation there is very different. But one of the things that has linked many of the discussions together was the close relation between formal structures and informal procedures in the production of social housing, even in Vienna. So that was a striking element. But the comments that the international guests had on what they saw, so they brought with them their case studies. But they also commented on practices that they saw here in Vienna, was that it's A, very unique, that it's, but B, that it was, we have here this question, so this was the result of last year, one of the results of last year's discussion, that there was some kind of an exclusionary and bounding element to social housing. And we had this discussion about social housing for all or social housing for the poor. And we had this discourse about all, that is a very inclusive approach that we follow here in Vienna. But at the same time, we looked at the boundaries of housing production and issues of where people did not have access and the high thresholds to some of the elements of social housing here in Vienna. And one of the elements that are causing these boundaries are, of course, the costs. And in this context, we had a discussion about the costs of renovation and the cost of energy efficiency and the cost of retrofitting. And one of the terms that came up there was renoviction, which was eviction by renovation. The question of, if you transform, if you upgrade housing to higher energy standards, that there is a likeliness that not all of the people involved can afford this. And there was a question of what kind of gamble this is and to what extent it's played out in local contexts. We did not look at in detail at that in Vienna. It was just one of the things that were popping up. And we were saying, let's look at this balance, the question of social sustainability and ecological sustainability, of social justice and ecological justice in the next year. And that is what we've done this year. If you could go to the next slide. So we invited, again, international colleagues to look at climate adaptation and mitigation in social housing. And we asked for papers and for contributions that look at that particular balance. We asked, or that particular challenge. And we asked questions, the fundamental question that we ask is, show us your practice. Show us how you deal with these balances. But within this practice, there's a couple of, there are a few elements that we are particularly interested in. And these elements are now going to be presented to you by Christoph.
So now, we had finally three themes, and our call had three topics. And one was that if we speak about social and ecological or environmental issues, we very often, especially from a Viennese point of view, we have in mind more or less a good governance of housing issues. And this means a very highly professionalized system of housing production. But especially in the context of environmental issues, local and bottom-up initiatives play a very big role. That means that people are suffering very often under certain conditions, and they try to change their situations. For example, today we learned in our research lab that people are in a constant adaptation process of the living situation, and they are constant appropriation and changing of the living situation is something where you also refer to environmental issues, for example, to heating, to climatization of your living space, which relates you again back to your environment, because this is something, AC, for example, is something which is really what is relating outside and inside. So bottom-up perspectives, and the question, what does it mean, and how environmental issues are driven by bottom-up perspectives and by bottom-up initiatives, is something we found very important. And we connected it with the notion of local, because especially the climate change is something which is, on the one hand, a global challenge, but on the other hand, we all know it is very locally in its effect. So this was one issue. The second was the question of infrastructure. Of course, infrastructures, what we call today green and blue infrastructures. Vienna has a lot of initiative developed with regard to cooling down streets, cooling down courtyards, and so on, and water-related issues. So the question was, how does infrastructure for cooling, shelter relate to other private and public infrastructures? And what do we know about a good management of those infrastructures? Because infrastructures do not be reproduced by itself. They have to be maintained, as we know. The third question was, is there, because we are in a building exhibition, that means we are both sociologists, but we are very often collaborating with architects, these planners, urban designers. The question is how, and is it possible to design urban space and housing in a way that it is adapted to climate change? So these three questions we developed. And we invited, as you can see, a faculty. We always invite very distinguished scientists, social scientists, architects, planners to our research lab. And this year we had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate with these colleagues, Laura Colini from Berlin, Florence, Céline de Cruz at the moment in Bangladesh. She comes initially from India and had been very involved in slum initiatives. Roberta Cook, who is at the moment professor of urban sustainability planning in Oslo. Abdul Malik Simon, an urbanist located in University of Sheffield. Yuri Kasepov, who is at the University of Vienna. Sascha Rössler, in the moment in Zurich, Swiss National Science Foundation Professor for Architecture. Fran Tonkis from LSE London. And finally, Sophie Watson, Open University in UK. And you see, we have, so the way normally we work, that we have classroom sessions, more or less academic one, and then we go into the field. We try to work with the students in certain environments where we tackle it and confront us with local, concrete situations, so to say. This was not possible this year due to the COVID-19 crisis. So what we had the last 2 days, we had 2 very intense days discussing papers brought in by our fellows. And here are 3 examples. We did not include the Viennese case because we thought, okay, Vienna we all know. So, but we here we show only to give you an idea that we always have examples from around the world. In the first year, many examples from Eastern Europe, East Asia. In the second last year, examples from Northern Africa, from India, Nepal, Southern America. And this year, as you can see, an example worked on by Lenka Kushvatova, originally located in Prague, on a construction site in Sao Paulo, in a neighborhood in Sao Paulo. We had also an example from Bogor, it is nearby Jakarta in Indonesia, and examples from Prague and Rome and Vienna. So what is intriguing by these, working with these examples this year is there had been a common theme, and one is that the role of the bottom, so to say, bottom up, the role of people living in, the role of social movements, the role of social realities, so to say, of people are living in. And the first example, Sao Paulo, is an example, is going back to a tradition of self-construction. So it is an example of self-construction neighborhood, but on a more professionalized level, where the social and ecological standards are achieved through self-construction. And the quality of the housing is higher than in the normal mass-produced housing. So this was very interesting. So what you see here are chair cases that are pre-produced, and then the houses are, so to say, connected. So this is a very interesting example, because of course this is going back, I think now 30 years, something like that, Lenka. And of course in these 30 years this changed a lot, because the political environment changed, the context changed. So one very interesting question for us is changing context, not only environmental one, but also political one, for example, in Brazil. The context of Indonesia is completely different, where we have in Sao Paulo a really, so to say, an initiative which is collaborating with architects and planners, but it is driven by people, by the people, so to say, le peuple. We have in Indonesia, in Bogor, more or less a perspective which is developed by specialists, planners, engineers, but they are working with the people at place, and they try to collaborate with them and to find solutions for the problem related to flooding, finally, especially in Indonesia, where at least once a year they are flooded, and the problem of rain recovery and so on. So this is a very, what they call a water-sensitive urban design through civic participation, because people know where they are living, how they're living, and how to find solutions, even they have not the technical knowledge maybe to realize it. And the third example we will present here is from Prague, and this is especially interesting because it is in the context of a city what we call today a post-socialist or post-communist context, where we have a very strong liberalization policy behind us, a privatization policy, and finally housing issues are rarely seen as something related to a public good. So what is the issue here is how local initiatives, which are partly supported by the local authorities, by the municipality, are finally a mean to increase knowledge, but also awareness that housing is not only a commodity, and that we should also take and reinterpret the role of public space and of green areas as parts of housing, because housing is not only related, as we all know, with privacy and home building, but also with environmental issues, going out, reaching out, and so on. So these were the three.
Just maybe one sentence
yes.
there. With the city of Prague, which is so close to Vienna, it is striking how different the situation is even there. Although we're just neighbors, if you look at the housing stock, if you look at the ownership structure, if you look at the relation between people and the local administration, it's just so different. So we're very happy to have Václav on the panel later on to discuss these issues with us.
Yeah, and as you can see, we tried to pick up here some some issues, some points we discussed in the last 2 days, and one is the bottom up, because we titled our research lab "Bottom Up and Local Perspectives," and immediately in the first day, in the first statement of a faculty member, the bottom up and local was contested, put into question. What does it mean? Does it mean the bottom up 10% of population? Does it mean the poorest? Does it mean the people are living in the neighborhood? I don't know. So this is something very interesting. It is finally, as we said, a messy concept. And we maybe should use other concepts also to avoid the dichotomy of here's bottom up and there's top down, because in realities of housing production, it is neither a completely bottom up, even in Sao Paulo it is not a bottom up process of production, nor it is a top down, because even it is produced, people finally live in and they will change this environment. So what is finally the housing reality is something which is always in between. So maybe we should work with other concepts. It was very interesting to put into question, and the same for the local, because the local is, as we know, related to other levels and other scales, wider scales. Yeah, we already mentioned the role of the context. The context is extremely important. That's why though interesting to compare, to have research lab like ours, to bring together completely different experiences and to look on how we can learn. So knowledge transfer also had been yesterday a very interesting topic with regard, for example, to Sao Paulo, and how to bring in knowledge from South America to European context. And a key issue is, for example, the social life of infrastructure. As already mentioned, the constant adaptation of living situations also concern the infrastructures. Also, infrastructures are not only technical issues, but social ones. They are embedded in social relations, but also finally, in certain way, produced. So this is there are some topics, but maybe Simon, you would like to add some more points.
Yeah, just not to bore you, to conclude with maybe the last two. The second last point on green and blue gentrification. So the question for today is about the balance between social issues and environmental issues. And we've seen quite a few cases in the last days hinting at green and blue gentrification, meaning what I mentioned earlier, renovation, meaning upgrading on the cost of the people who have been living there before. So the relation between the social issues and environmental issues, or social goals and environmental goals, or social justice and environmental justice, it's a fundamental one, but it's also a question of perspective and a question of concepts, what you understand by these terms. If we so there might be this contradiction if you look at the social through an economic lens, and you say social goals are perceived if we have affordable housing, then and environmental standards are achieved if we have the highest standards and the highest technology, then there might be a serious issue. But you could also look at it through a different lens, and the cases that we have discussed today and yesterday see that environmental problems and environmental challenges can be an initiation or an invitation to social collaboration, and can lead to community building, because this is, in particular in housing, these are things that you cannot escape. You cannot escape the extreme weather conditions, and you cannot escape the heating, and you cannot solve it individually. And you cannot solve it if you produce housing as a commodity and you have distant relations and only contract relations. You need to do this together. And as diverse as the cases have been over the last 2 days, they all looked at these at processes, how environmental questions brought people together around housing. And this afternoon, we've looked at a few cases in Vienna that we will discuss. For instance, the Biotope city that we can discuss in further detail. But I thought that was really also kind of moving and gave us some positive, because initially I was quite skeptical, because I had more of the blue and green, kind of the bad take on it, if you will, the blue and green gentrification. But to see that there are so many different other approaches, if you look at the relation between social and ecological justice, that was quite inspiring, and gave us some ideas for thinking further that we will take into our discussions next year. And as another inspiration for our discussion that we're going to have now, one thing we've done this year, which we've not done before, is that we did some films. So we used we introduced another format. These films are about Vienna, and you want to introduce them?
Only to say one word. These are, so to say, 3 clips we will see, but the film is not yet finished completely, so it will continue. The colleagues who are doing the film, ethnographic filmmakers, they will make a more longer series of clips, so to say, documenting bottom-up perspectives to climate change. So.
And in November they will be finished, and there will be another invitation for a film launch and discussion about the film and issues that will open today.
So the research lab will continuing this year and not be finished today.
Tree cycle is a small and tangible solution to cool off the cities, especially the gray spaces in the city, the paved yards, the backyards, the school backyards, the big squares, and shopping streets. So the problem is that rainwater cannot evaporate in the atmosphere, and so therefore it's not possible that cities cool off during the night. And that's the main reason why we have these urban heat islands.
Yeah, so I think the big difference to other mobile greenery is that it tries to collect rainwater from surface areas, especially from rooftops. And then the collected rainwater is slowly evaporated through this ecosystem, which its main component is the tree.
We combine simple ideas. Yeah? It's no rocket science, I think. People use.
We see sustainability not only in an ecological way but in a social way. So we are trying to give disadvantaged young people the chance to be part of another city, be part of a future city which is worth living in. We see it as an easy, accessible and affordable product.
This was the view when we started 10 years ago to plan the project. It's just gravel all over. This is actually now what we have now. But as you see, it's not a lot of green. It's about 10% green on the rooftop. And this should be the future when we have the moss. Moss can eat up to 75% of the fine dust that's in the air, the pollution that's in the air. So it would clear the air here, refresh it, cool it down, and change the climate for us and for everyone living here around, some 100 families. Moss only is the new thing, because if there are no people that use liquid on a rooftop, the moss is not the best way to cover the roof. But since we are growing here our vegetables, we handle with the water, and we can help the moss to improve its way over the complete roof. Moss stops to grow or to stop the photosynthesis at about 30 degrees. So, and then it's better to let it dry out, and then it can resist over 100 degrees, most of the moss. Moss can sleep while it's too hot, and after that you can refresh it just by adding water, and you can have a look, it's green within seconds. Ten years ago, our idea was to convert 2,000 square meters of gravel into 2,000 square meters of living green, but the static didn't allow this, so we had to find tricks. One of the tricks was to make ultralight places to grow our vegetables, some sort of small steel, rubber, and that's about it. Yeah. And with the moss we can gain another lightweight element here, because 1 square meter of gravel is about 100 kilos, and 1 square meter of the moss is about 12 kilos. When it's completely wet, it's about 18, but this is 18% of the gravel weight.
I grew up with a garden, so my parents always had a garden, but this experience has been very different in a way that it's, I mean, of course, a lot bigger, and so you can grow a lot of different things, and also plants that just need more space and more care, and yeah, and also I think the work together, so working together as a team, and I mean we are a bigger team than you would maybe normally have for a small garden. And the thing that I find the most intriguing about this project, and also the most interesting, is that every person can do whatever he likes to do best, or also what he thinks he can do best. So you don't have to really work with tools that you don't know how to use, or you don't need to work with plants that you maybe don't like that much. You don't have to succeed in what you do, but rather you can try out different things, and people are here to help you and support you. I think the biggest challenges in this specific project are first the water. And what I also find a little sad sometimes is that we plant so much, and then in the summer, these are the months that everything is ripe and ready to eat. And then a lot of people go on vacation.
we all could continue to work on the field, because the field is big, as you can see, and we could work with 1 meter or 2 meters between us. We could talk to each other. Actually, I even in this Corona time, I made new friends here, because one of my colleagues, she comes from Cappadocia, and she is planting okra, ladyfingers. So I was very curious, because I go to buy my ladyfingers in the Indian shop. And she told me, no, why? We will plant them by ourselves. And it was very interesting, no? You see, these times are very tough. I think socially they are very tough, because everybody, I mean, the system wants us to live everybody by his or her own. We should not do collective things. Collective, I think it's the real cure of this time. It's not easy, but it's good. There is enough for all of us.
May I ask our guests to join us on the stage, please? Yes. Václav also? Yes, please. So just choose your seat. So we planned to start with introducing our guests and with the statements that they brought, so that you know what they are dealing with and the aspects of climate change, and then we can open the discussion to the public after the first round, actually. So that there is also one micro for the audience, so we will also deal with it during the Corona time. I think it's cool that Václav is sitting on as like the first person, so I can now invite someone coming from outside of Vienna, from Prague. Václav is one of the participants of the summer school, and Christoph Reinprecht already introduced one of the projects that was presented today. And Václav Orcígr is head of the campaign Prague City
for Living. Prague
City for Living, because my comment was, wow, that sounds like Vienna, and I wrote City of Vienna. So that sounds like really familiar to us, when you know City for Living, and it is an NGO called Arnika. And can you tell us a little bit about what you're dealing with there, and can you compare it to projects that you saw in Vienna, or what are you missing in Vienna? So, like, to put it in a relation to each other, these two cities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first of all, thank you for the possibility to be here. Again, thank you, Simon and Christoph, of course, Lena, and everybody for the possibility to join the summer school, which was really very inspirative for us. And speaking about our organization, Arnika is ecological NGO, been established actually almost 20 years ago. And actually we deal with a lot of topics, but the part of the team I'm kind of trying to lead, which is called Prague City for Living, is to focus on what is happening in Prague in terms of urban development, spatial planning, housing affordability, and so on. And also climate change adaptation is one of the topics we are trying to kind of push into the public discourse because, as already Simon and Christoph said, the context of Prague, of how the city is developing, how it was developing after the Velvet Revolution, with all the privatization going and this very strict neoliberal shift to towards the private marketization of housing, basically. So these are all the circumstances that actually bring troubles both to climate adaptation measures and housing accessibility and affordability. So this was actually funny that you thought that the campaign is called like that, but actually Vienna, of course, is a big example for us in many ways. Both because of the historical development. Of course, Vienna is very advantaged because the whole history, because the big privilege to own such a huge amount of public flats, which actually gives Vienna very big instruments to kind of push those policies that actually may secure affordable housing for various social groups, and also it also gives the city of Vienna the possibility to push those progressive measures in terms of climate adaptation and mitigation. So the one thing is that there are many positive examples of positive praxis in these both topics, both housing and then the climate change adaptation measures. But also it's important to know that Vienna has been historically privileged to actually have those instruments basically in the hands of the city. So for us it was really super nice to be here, to have the option to know about the current issues that are happening in Vienna, and actually also to talk with these amazing experts who were kind of providing us with various comments on what we are dealing with.
Thank you. It's I think it's also interesting that this outside view is like we are privileged and we have this history, but I would also say it's a hard work not only by the politics but also by people and also by the initiatives that are also here, even if you don't see it on the first side. So it's something that we still keep on doing and working in order to stay like that. So it's also, we also have to be thankful to the people with all these initiatives in the movie that we saw and all other idea carriers around who at some point start, and then at some point it gets that we can say, okay, it's institutionalized and it's part of our everyday life. So the struggle is still even here. We also have Helga Fassbinder tonight with us. She's a chairperson of Biotope City, and she's a founder of Biotope City. This was already mentioned before because the participants of summer school visited today. Biotope City was presented like almost 20 years ago in 2002 for the first time. And it was a concept, an idea. And now Vienna, we have apartments that are, people are already living there. It's called Biotope City Wienerberg. And Helga, you were one of the initiators for this also project in Vienna. But also maybe you can tell us a little bit, you know, how was the beginning, not only of this project, but also the being an activist and toward the subjects of climate adaptation, but also the density in social housing, you know, because these are things that maybe don't get together at the first sight, also in the new planned buildings. So just about, you know, remembering how it was and how it came to the Biotope city and how hard or easy it was.
It is on? Okay. Well, first of all, I want to remain one thing. The field of housing always has been a field of fight and struggle. And Vienna has taken a special position in this fight, and this is still the case until today. It is not by chance that the Biotope city Wienerberg is the first project who realizes a concept which has in the picture not only social housing, good living conditions, but also the question of relationship with nature and climate conditions among we are living. Actually, we are living at the moment in a time of very fast changes, and actually three topics. The first one is the number of species globally. We are one of these enormous amount of species, the human one, and this is changing very fast. We are growing and other kinds of species are decreasing. The loss of biodiversity is a result of this. The second one is the loss of natural resources, including fossil resources, energy resources. And this is dramatically as well. Last year, there came out a report of the United Nations about the perspectives of natural resources until the middle of the century, and this was dramatic because, well, we are confronted with a situation that we have to reduce our consumption of natural resources. And the next one is the climate change. And all these together makes that we as architects and planners have to confront our traditional ideas about how a city should look like and how housing should look like and so on, and to adapt it to the new conditions. I was in a strange situation 20 years ago because I had a car accident and I was forced to stay at home because I could not, I had a whiplash and I could not bear anything around me, and the only possibility I had to communicate with the world was to look out of the window. I'm living in the middle of Amsterdam. It's a really dense city. And what I saw was a huge tree, and I saw how that there was actually a world outside the human world in this inner courtyard, and I thought, well, we make a mistake. It's not true that our cities are divided from nature. Actually, we are in the middle of nature, and we should regard that as a challenge to come to new ideas how we introduce nature actually into and adapt nature in the city. And this because I also had read in this time publications of James Hansen, a climate expert from the 70s. He's still working, and he made quite a lot of efforts to make politicians aware of the climate change. So these were the origins about my efforts to come to a new concept for the city, and this was then Biotope City. Within other species, within green in the city. And now we are in a situation that luckily quite a lot of organization of people so are aware about the mitigation of green regarding the climate. This is the most cheap method actually to improve our situation also in future. But we must not forget that green flora is not possible without fauna. Green means immediately a lot of insects, of birds, little animals, and so on. And we cannot use the idea of greening the city as a kind of instrument, a technical instrument which is green. No? That's not possible. It's not only not true, it's not possible. So we, with our idea of another approach to the city, we have to regard these aspects as well. This is another, another aspect which should constantly be brought into into our planning, because it's a little bit touched by being afraid of this kind of nature. Wasps and spiders and so on. But I guess that a new approach to the city in the sense of living a biotope city needs also education in this aspect. And so I would like to make a suggestion for the summer school. You have made a bridge between the university and the technical university. I guess it's necessary perhaps to make a third bridge to the Department of Vegetation Technology, the BOKU. This knowledge has to be part of another approach, and perhaps to the Academy of Art as well, because one of the problems to make a change in building is also the aesthetics of modernism. I have given quite a lot of lectures, and the approach of Biotope City, normally people can understand that quite quickly. It's not so easy to understand. But those who are educated in the aesthetic of modernism immediately are afraid about the consequences that this have. Architects sometimes tell, well, our buildings are not seen if you cover the city with green. So, but you should take this as a challenge. What other kinds of aesthetics can you find by introducing green into the city itself? And this is a wonderful new perspective. So perhaps it's good to take the academy into the club as well.
Thank you very much, Helga. It's so interesting. I think that this bringing other species is also widening the notion of social again. So what is really social and how social is our society? I would like to introduce also Thomas Madreiter. I'm very happy that he also joined us tonight. Thomas Madreiter is planning director of the city of Vienna, and there are a lot of different subjects that he is responsible for. I prepared it in German.
To put it in a nutshell, I'm responsible for everything which is running wrong in the city of Vienna.
I will. Should I oppose to that? No. But especially something that I think that will also change the city in the future, and now we also see it in some projects, is the smart city strategy that you've been responsible for and developing with other actors and partners from the city and planners and people working on in local city areas. When you go into the smart city strategy just a little bit, then you come upon that actually there is also a Viennese way here. It is very much about also thinking the realities of people into it. So not just trying to reduce the carbon dioxide, but also to think how can we maybe avoid reviction. How did you say it? How did you call it, Simon? Renovation. Can you explain just a little bit also for our guests what does it mean, the Viennese way of smart city strategy, or maybe there are also some.
Okay.
Yes.
I tried. I hope I can finish it till midnight. No. Thanks a lot for inviting me here. I think it's a great topic you discuss here, and it's a great topic for the summer school. It's a great room here. I'm not sure if everyone has seen the exhibition of IBA Vienna. It's a great exhibition. I have seen it last Saturday, so take your time, take a look to the IBA exhibition. It's really interesting. There are a lot of good projects you can see. But to the question. Like the topic for this evening, if I understood it right, is to bridge or to balance social sustainability and ecological sustainability. And I think to make it very short, the approach of Smart City Vienna is more or less the same. As you know, Vienna has a very long tradition as a social sensitive city. Last year we had 100 years of social housing in Vienna, and I think that Vienna has stressed over the last 30-40 years its role as in Deutsch, in German we say Umweltmusterstadt, environmental showcase city or something like this. My English is a bit poor, as you can hear. Beyond this background, more or less 10 years ago, we saw the Smart City Initiative coming up from the European Union, and we thought that this had been a very technocratic approach, yes? And our thesis was that a city for people, or a city with quite high standards in quality of living, has to be first and last a city which is a good place for the people, a good place for living, yes. And there in Vienna we said, for us a smart city is a city where no one is left behind. This is a picture, yes. And at the beginning also we discussed or stood the idea of how can we tackle the problems of climate change. And I think this is the biggest challenge mankind had ever to face. And I'm absolutely not convinced. I'm absolutely not convinced that this is an average position in the society, not in Austria, not in Vienna, not globally. And as Helga mentioned before, it's a real dramatic situation. Yes, it's a real dramatic situation. If you compare Vienna or Austria or the Alpine room with the global situation, you have to face that the decrease of temperatures since the industrialization in this room, in the Alpine room and also in Vienna, has the double amount than the average global decrease of temperature. And this is extreme, yes? And so in the last 20, 30 years, the climate situation, even in Vienna, changed dramatically. And it will also change in the next 30 years, 40 years, 60 years, 100 years. Climate change is going on. And so if you would ask me what's the overall goal of Smart City Vienna, or what's the overall goal of the urban development policy in Vienna for the next years, we have to find solutions to tackle the situation of heating in the city. And as you know, that in Vienna we have very huge areas which has been built up in the founders area. And as you know, these are areas which with a very high urban density, with very low green spaces. In this situation, we have big jobs for ahead of us. And so thank you very much for your initiative. We need both. We need a city with a very strong leadership, with clear goals, with clear strategies. But we have to turn Vienna into, let me say, a bottom-up city. This is not the genetic code of Vienna. The genetic code of Vienna is, you know, Joseph II, everything for the people, nothing with the people. But I think this is not a helpful strategy. So we have to activate the people. We have to give the people a biotope or circumstances to realize their ideas. And we need a lot of ideas. We need a lot of different ideas because we have to cool the city.
Thank you very much, and I think that is also why it is so great to have this IBA research in summer school every year, because you're you have the courage to try things out, because bottom up and social housing and Vienna and public homes, this is not something that is natural to Viennese.
Contradictions.
It is contradictory. But like my professional background, coming back from working in local communities or with people on site, the society is changing. It's just that the challenge is how can we bring together the activism and people who want to support, and the strategies of the city. Also, we have to admit that the regulations in public space, who is allowed to plant something, who can bring water to the trees, or who can participate. So who are the all? So that is also something that we will also have to overcome. But the society in Vienna is also changing, and this is also great. This is also great news. I would like, before I open to the audience, to ask both of you, so maybe you can answer both. Because today you will also, with your participants of the summer school in the Biotope city, and also the 50 greenhouses, but you're also, you also know the projects, the other projects, also IBA candidates in our exhibition. Did you find the notion of bottom-up there? Or are there some potentials, you know, for further development, so the community building and all the other mentioned topics that you mentioned from other works or from the movie can come out and thrive?
May I start? No, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your comments. And I think what is we visited Biotope City, and Biotope City for the moment is not, it's only part, there is their residents, and their huge part not yet, until next spring, so it is in construction. And of course, for example, our guests had been astonished in some way that a place called Biotope City is a place full of bitumen, of betonized, completely modernized place, in that sense. So where is the green? Where is the biotope? So, and this, of course, we know, then we learn the trees will come, the green will come, and so on. But it remembers me one aspect, and then Tamara, she guided us through, she told us about the tunnels for the animals and so on, all these ideas, and that finally also a built environment is part of the natural system. But this remembers me an observation we meet very often, that we have a strong desire to meet nature and to integrate nature, to relate us to nature, but we are full of fear. So it's not only the snake in the room. We learned today that there had been snakes in the apartments in Biotope City, but all these animals are in some way only good animals if we can domesticize them and if we have control over them. So I say this because the problem is, the problem from a social scientist point of view, the interesting point, there is a conflict. There is a deep conflict between, so to say, civilization and nature, because we have learned to control nature and natural environment. And once we try to say, okay, we are part, and we have such a strong desire, but at the same time, this desire implies huge control. So you can observe it the same as related to our behavior if we go to mountains. People take high risk, but at the same time, they pay high security assurances that they are brought out if they are in risk finally. So this is something I've found very interesting today. So there are conflicts in this relation between built environment and this idea, which I think we completely agree, and which is really challenging, that we are part of something more than a built environment, and that we are related to, as we learned also by the film and so on. This is one aspect, and only one small remark. Thank you, of course, Helga. I completely agree. Last year we invited colleagues from BOKU and business school and so on to our school. We did not so this year because under these circumstances. But I agree completely to one point. We did a lot of quality of life research. It's one of our specialization in Vienna. quality of life, quality of housing. And you know what is interesting? That normally we would say, okay, what are elements of quality? Is economic one, and sociability, and cultural one, I don't know. And we rarely integrate the aesthetic. And we know from our research that aesthetic is an independent dimension. That's extremely interesting. That means it is contributing to quality of life independently from the other dimensions. It is not to be reduced to the social, to the cultural, to the whatever, psychological, economic dimension. It's a really independent one. And this I've always found interesting, and that's why, of course, there's also a tension, because if we go to Biotope City and we're looking to the architecture, the aesthetic understanding of an architecture and of people living in is quite different. And that's why I mentioned earlier this idea, a colleague today spoke about this constant adaptation of living space, because this is where the aesthetic understanding of the people is coming to terms, so to say. And this is something where I only would like to add, because I found it interesting and very important to add and to open these exchanges also to other spheres. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to be too provocative, but one of the limits of the way that we're discussing in the summer school and that we've set up the whole thing is that we tend to look at exceptions, right? We look at nice projects, we look at exceptional structures, and the same here. And even within these exceptions, we see the limits. Like in Biotope City, there's 980 apartments and 800 parking lots. And and with the 50 green buildings, we were discussing with the person who's doing it on a parking lot. Yeah, we were on the street. There were, you know, we're in between. If you compared us to the environment, we were in between, in between cars, and so the wider context is crucial. And I just wonder about the limits of the bottom up thing, and how we talk to each other. Because with these little exceptions, we will not manage to approach the huge questions and the necessary transformation to escape the risks of the dramatic risks that we are facing. So I keep thinking about the slogan of the International Building Exhibition, which is New Social Housing, and about 100 years ago, whatever, in the early 20th century, social housing was a response to a particular question at that time, which was a social question, and the social in economic terms and in distributional terms. It was housing for the poor or the working class, rather, let's say that. And that question, the affordability, was answered then. But it was answered in a classic Fordist way, I mean, with very many different, in a modernist way. And of course, people then did not think about externalities. They did not think about the environmental cost. They saw about the economic cost, and economic in a very limited and strict sense. And these days, and I'm thinking about Fridays for Future and all and all of the challenges. These days, that is just a very, very limited approach, conception of social. And I think new social housing needs to have the relation between us and not only the society in terms of us living together, but the resources. I mean, the term resources in itself is problematic, but the wider nature and the rest of the environment, we have to take that into account. And I think there's new questions. Of course, we need to address affordability, and it's a huge issue, and the right to housing, etc. But through housing, through the way we produce and we consume space, we can do a lot to change, but we cannot do this by continuing giving people a parking, you know, for their apartment, one parking lot, and all of these things. And these questions, as necessary it is to think about bottom up, but these questions need a clear, rigid, far-reaching response. And I think there's a chance I still see this huge chance of a city like Vienna. I mean, there's all these slogans, you know, here we can, and we have a responsibility here because we have the resources, we have the power, and we can say, yes, our power is very limited, etc. But compared to all of the other cities and cases that have been presented from all around the world, there's massive power. And you're leading by example on the smart city, the way you're approaching the concept of smartness is totally different to many other cities. Many are looking at us. It's very social. It's very it's in contrast to the surveillance capitalist model and all of. There's a huge chance here, and I think it's necessary to bring this self-esteem that you have there into the housing, into addressing housing with through new lenses that include the environmental issues that we've been discussing today.
Thank you, Simon. I think it's very interesting to think the new social, not only in the social relations between social spaces and the city and the tenants and apartment owners, but also to the wider nature. So it's really to take over this responsibility. So I will try, because we are very late with the time also. No, I'll just ask in the audience, is there already some questions to our guests? So something, Daniela? Lena? So Lena will help us. Also, please consider to keep the distance. No, it doesn't work with the mask. We already tried out. Just to keep the distance from the micro, it doesn't spit back.
Okay, good.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Okay, I will try. So thank you for this very interesting discussion, actually for this very interesting and relevant topic. I want to continue where Simon stopped now, because I had prepared a question that was actually going into the right, or in the same direction. So my question is actually if adaptation and climate change is not a real and classical top-down topic, actually. It's a polemical question, as yours was, and it works with this simplistic framework. But it is about the change of our understanding, it is about policy stimuli and financial stimuli to change politics. So these are really top-down decisions to take. And if it is not somehow reductive to frame it, first of all, as bottom-up. And the broader question is this the right topic to change our DNA, or shouldn't we, to keep it in this frame, or shouldn't we build on this DNA if this is such an important topic, and to a very strong institutional framework which has strong top-down elements, but gives us a lot of possibilities. It's a polemic question, but yeah.
So Simon or Thomas Madreiter? Yes, yeah. I'm just cautious.
Yes, I think it sounds a bit like a political answer, but I think we need both. Like I tried to mention, we need a city with a clear policy, a strong leadership, but not in the way of thinking of Joseph II. It has to be balanced with a modern framework of activation of the people, or not activation. I think it's the wrong term. Give bottom-up initiatives room. I think this is the better way of thinking. And to the remark of Simon, sir, yes, sir. But as Mr. Wolfinger, who is here with us, I think more or less, yes, could be. And this is one example for this. We have in the Viennese building law the basis for, I would say, this very problematic situation with the parking lots. Yes, but on the other side, I don't think this is our biggest problem, because it's quite idiotical, because we are investing a lot of money in parking space we won't need in 20 or 30 years. This is quite idiotical, because I hope that the building has a time for the next 100 or 150 years. But I'm sure that the mobility activities of the population in Vienna will change in the next 20, 30 years, 40 years in a way that we have to invest a lot of brain in a programming of these parking lots. So I would say in 30 years it's not an ecological problem. It's a problem of stranded investments.
Thank you. Daniele, is that okay for starting the discussion? Lena, there is a question here. I just add a comment on parking lots and Biotope City and also other projects. I do have to say that Biotope City started, the idea of Biotope City in Vienna started 9 years ago, something like that. And that connection to the new mobility, we really, I think, learned a lot. So then the other projects that you will find in Vienna that just developed this year or 2 years ago, you have much less space for parking lots. This is a very important topic in Vienna, as you can see. And this is also very interesting, because that's where the ideas that is where you really have to have challenges when then leading participation processes with people living in the city and getting the old. So that is something that I think the parking lot is something that we are working on, but to build ecologically and also that is climate friendly, like that is cooling, not only climate friendly, and also for all, this is something that is still a challenge even in this city. So please.
Yeah, thank you. The question or the comment is related to Daniel's comment and also the question of the law. I bring it along one example in the Brunnenviertel. I'm an urban researcher since a long time in this area. And there is I think many of you know the project Garage Grand, the Grand Garage. And it's really a cool project because it's a Zwischennutzung of the garage, and there are many initiatives, and one is urban green and vertical greening. And it's working out quite well because they did something against the law. They cut out the asphalt, parts of the boulevard, and so the green could grow in 6 weeks. And the problem is, we did a small tour there, and they told us, oh, yeah, normally it's not allowed. But because we are working together, we are from the local planning bureau, we can do it. Yeah? But it would be necessary, because I'm researching at the Brunnenviertel since more than 10 years, and on the Uppenplatz, you have also vertical green. But so what my question is, I think, or it's a comment, we have to rethink also the laws and to make possibles. And the other question I wanted to put at the end of the whole talk is also about the Brunnenviertel, because I think there are many new parts of the city where you have urban green and the social question coming together, it's working out. But in my neighborhood, there are many migrant flats in the first floor. Many people, I see all these machines to cool down the flats, and I think we need a smart tool for people in these small flats, which are smart and affordable. And I think there is some question of energy production, maybe on the roofs, and alternative ways of greening?
Yes, and one answer is, for example, the sun protection on the south facades. We have established a supporting measure. You get money from the city. If you add this, yes, and I'm with you with a comment.
Yeah.
I also want to make a statement on this, comment on this discussion, bottom up and top down. What is the right strategy? I am a member of one of the projects on this film, on this field project, Labergbauerinnen, it's the name. And I personally spent a lot of time and energy to not only to bring up my vegetables, but also to bring up this this really lovely and nice but very challenging project in the 10th district in Favoriten. But I also feel very often that this energy, which is bounded by many engaged people who are doing this bottom-up project, kind of sometimes Biedermeier behavior. Yeah? So I'm really spent my energy to bring up my coal, my salad, and on the other hand, there's this parallel sphere. You have a major outdated project, in my view, to make a autobahn, a motorway tunnel under the most important natural national park in Vienna, and nobody's talking about this. Yeah, there is nearly no political activism, and yeah, so I would like to have a government which makes it in a Joseph II manner and say, well, we have really a dramatic situation. Why are we going to invest milliards in a major infrastructure which is here for many years? And so I say to my members, if there is the first caterpillar in the Lobau, I don't do anything in our field. I go to invest my energy to tackle this development. Yeah? And I think that it's these parallel spheres, how city development is decided, done. Yeah, I'm always wondering how these parallel realities can stand next to each other and are not touching each other.
May I say something?
Yes, please.
I think city is always a place of contradiction. City is always a place of conflicts, and city is always it's never an idealistic world. I'm not a fan of the Lobau crossing project, but I have to say two things. First, there will be no caterpillars in the Lobau. Second, the Lobau crossing is not a project of the city of Vienna. And third, the population of Vienna decreased in the last 30 years about the amount of 400,000 people. 400,000 people. And there will be one big new street. I'm with you, you can discuss this street, but I think you put it in the right framework.
So, one more question.
My question is, we have 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there was this smart city where lots of people took part over many, many weeks. What I'm missing is, or what I would appreciate, if a city like Vienna would start a project like the Smart City project, which is concerned with climate, with all the projects which have to do with climate change, and that we get a perspective over the next 50 years, what has to be done. And there are so many different small things, big things, huge things which have to be done. But so many ideas there, the biological ideas, the sociological ideas, the aesthetic ideas, the big planning ideas. And we have to bring them together somehow. Without this huge vision, we won't be able to we will make some bottom-up, some big things, we will have some new laws. But first, before we start with all these things, so we have to get a real big vision, like the Smart City project was. So this should, in my opinion, and this is the question, is the city planning such a thing?
A short answer. We started with Smart City in 2010. The first strategy, the first draft of the strategy has been adopted by the Vienna City Council in 2014. After a very deep-going political discussion. I think this is a big difference to the most other international smart city strategies. And in 2019, we had the City Council adopted the release Smart City 2. It was a reaction of the Paris goals. And from a perspective from inside the city administration, I have to say that even Smart City strategy is still now our strong framework. We started last year, for example, an initiative to establish a climate budget, one project, and or for a lot of different measures, there is always the Smart City strategy is our umbrella. It's the political umbrella for a lot of measures, but I'm with you. We have to discuss the participation aspect of the strategy, yes. And we have also discussed, or we have foster, I would say, we have to foster the linking to the civil society.
I'm sorry, but this is by far not enough, because there are so many new techniques which could not, and I'm not speaking about that the smart city should turn into techniques in the technique movement, not at all. But there are so many new techniques how we can cool down the city without using too much water, and there are so many new approaches to this topic that and let's just say one of the biggest problems is that we build everything with concrete. So today it's necessary, but what is the vision? Do we have a vision? No, we don't have a vision, not at all. Do we have a vision what we are doing with farming in the city? I mean, Paris had big farming.
May I interrupt you? If we want to have -80 or -100% CO2 till 2040 or till 2050, we have to stop to build everything with concrete. It's absolutely clear. And so this is the framework for guys like you to establish new ideas. It's up to you. We have to stop complaining. We have to start acting.
I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. I'm working on these topics. But as I know, there are many. For example, in my mind, the new inventions are not made in the city in this aspect. They are made in the countryside, and on the countryside, they are, of course, they are small, but they can be much larger. We could take them to the city, and this is something what's very, very difficult to implement in the city. So the city has to get a new vision, and it's like the smart city. Of course, the city knew what to do and they had a certain vision, but they invited a huge amount of people to take part in this development. And in my mind, this has to happen. This has to happen again with the climate question. So I would appreciate if the city would make such a project like they did it in Smart City, like you did it in Smart City.
I think I understand what's the point. For me, Smart City is our climate strategy. Yes, but I understand what's your point.
It's not a new vision. It was a perfect, very good vision, but it has to be renewed.
I think Helga would also would like to add something to this.
Yeah, I guess smart city is an umbrella, and the content of it is we have to fill it up with ideas which are up to the challenge of today. And I offer Biotope City as the implementation of the smart city.
I would also like to add different circumstances, like in Vienna we do take time, and processes they do take time, and it is like that's why some things really get to the people, like the new Viennese way, but it takes time also to explain the innovations, or to let people let people to grow into these innovations. So not that we let them grow into it. So, and this is really like slowly, and it might not sound like it's something innovative now, but I think when we go back into it, that also the smart city strategy thinking in a way of how are the realities of people living there will also be innovative. So it's not about it is a new vision actually, to take it that slowly. What is very considering to me, or I like kind of what I'm worrying about, is that we don't really have time for that long and slow processes, and that's why I'm also with you when you say the climate change should be, or the climate adaptation should be the new social housing, like, because we don't really have time. The time is running off, and we had this summer, this is not that, but we thought that it's the climate change is not here, but that's not really true, because it was even this summer half a degree warmer than it was usual 20 years ago. So and it was raining and it was really cold. So there's two parts that are coming, like we don't have time, but the processes do take time. And in Vienna, I think that's the quality, actually, a lot of things. Yes, and Simon, please.
I'd just like to comment on this, or to come in on this discussion. I think, changes can only happen together, not in Joseph II way, but and this is about communication, it's about relations, about how we speak with each other, etc. And I think, unfortunately, at the time when you looked at the smart city concept and you introduced the smart city concept, you went for a slogan and for a label that is really difficult to communicate and to market. I remember that when there was one of the many crises of the European Union, of the European project, well, at that time it was before the European Union, Jacques Delors mentioned once that we need a new project because people don't fall in love with the market. And I just have this in mind. I, as a citizen, can't participate in a smart city because I don't get it. It's just very. I think you have a really good framework for a huge public administration and for corporate relations and all of these things. It's very sensitive. It's very smart in many ways. But you can't communicate this to citizens who don't even understand what being a citizen is, because our citizenship is such a complex concept. So even intelligent, it's not a matter of which levels at school I have or whatever. It's a responsibility, I think, or it's helpful to look at things that relate us together. And the concerns that that is what I found interesting about, or also kind of emotionally moving about the projects that we discussed today and yesterday in in our summer school, there were people coming together because they wanted to do something together, and that was a better life. And that better life was very tangible because it's their house, it's their apartment, it's their shadow, it's their environment. And I think there's it's a question of communication and building relations, and I just follow in this. I don't think we need a large state to give us a vision, but I think we need a huge effort to communicate together in a language that brings us to the things that we want to do together. And the Smart City Framework strategy has a lot of potential in terms of its content, in particular because you have participation as one of the goals, but you have interesting tasks ahead of you.
Thomas Madreiter would like to respond. I would just recommend you to look into Smarter Together Gemeinsam Gescheiter project, which is going to be reloaded in a different way. So maybe you can also rethink that.
To make it very short, and it's maybe it's too short, but I want to focus because I asked to end the discussion at 9 p.m. So we're 2 minutes before 9 p.m. The smart city concept and the smart city strategy, I would say, the main goal for us is to reorganize the city administration and how we act as a city administration. And the second main goal, sorry to say, to communicate with the European Commission and to earn money from the European Commission. But in communication with the citizens in Vienna, we are talking about cooling the city, we are talking about a greener city, we are talking about mist fest, and I don't know, but take a look in the city, take a look in our advertisements and so on. We are not talking to the people, and we are not communicating to the people the brand of the smart city. This is our internal, more or less, our internal project. But I'm with you. I think it's not useful to start a campaign to discuss with the people from the street overall smart city goals. I think it's not necessary because they have other problems. But I'm also convinced that, and name it smart city strategy or give it a different name, but to realize the change management, and we are absolutely running out of time facing the problems of climate change. So we have to reorganize the way of acting in the city of administration in a dramatically short time. And there we need clear processes, and our name for this process is Smart City, but not to communicate with the people to stimulate greening projects and so on.
Thank you very much. Thomas Madreiter already said we are approaching the end of the time that we planned for this evening. Christoph Reinprecht also wanted to respond on this, and may I ask you just like to end around with one very simple wish for the future regarding climate adaptation, regarding social spaces. It can also be just one word, like, I don't know, ecological buildings or green and bloom structures, whatever. So, Christoph, please.
One thing is, I think speeding up cannot be the answer, because I understand completely that there is we are in a difficult times, and there is a risk that the climate change will, I don't know. But at the same time, we know from the last decades that if we say we have to speed up, this also, there's something behind. That it's not that you have the something behind, but it's a certain strategy to also to visibilize and to invisibilize. So to frame, it's a framing. And what we are doing, and this is extremely important to be aware of that, we have, and there a link to your remark to the Biedermeier and Lobautunnel. The problem is that we have not only increase of population, we have also increase of poverty. We have increase of people in very, very, very difficult living situations. We have increase of people disconnected from realities of labor, of work, and of other social relations. So, and we are continuing, and today it was very interesting, we went to the Biotope city, and Tamara told us, okay, the tenants are required to cultivate the balconies. So there's some ideas we already find in the Red Vienna. Tenants have to do something which is good for everybody, for the common. But how, what is the response among people who are disconnected in a certain way from what we have as vision in social housing policies? So I only would like to focus on that because it is at least our topic, social and ecological sustainability. So I think it's something we should have in mind, that there is a huge conflict finally behind, and Vienna has, Thomas Madreiter said it, that city is always also struggle and conflict, that's right, but Vienna has a tradition in this social democratic tradition of pacifying, so to say, conflicts. And this is, in that moment, also a problem. I think it's very important to accept conflicts, even if it's hard to accept, and to know that there are conflicts, so to say, if we invisibilize tensions and questions which are very relevant if we are confronting us with realities of our societies. But the only, and this is my last remark, so to say.
Okay, so that would also be like your wish for the future, to take into consideration the increasing of poverty. Thank you very much. Simon, would you like to add something? Just
not like a Christmas wish, but
okay.
one of the things that struck me in the discussions is the variability of the concept of social. And I think if we continue, in particular within Vienna, in particular within the realm of the International Building Exhibition, etc., to think, to spell out and to reconsider what social housing can mean, and what contribution housing can do to our society and to our community, and how we can use housing as an instrument to foster community and to talk to each other. Yeah, that would be good, and I'm very optimistic.
Thank you. Thomas Madreiter would like to add something?
As my last words, at the end I'm very optimistic, otherwise I wouldn't be an urban planner. And I think the people in Vienna are much more progressive than we think. This makes me hopefully.
Thank you. All of this sounds very great. Helga, please.
Yeah, I think it is very necessary, very important to make a good evaluation of the Biotope city, Wienerberg, because this is a first approach of institution of nature in the city, which in my eyes is most affordable form to decrease the temperature in a very fast time, in only a few years. But it's also a social, has also a strong social dimension. I give very fast a little example in Den Haag. The most difficult neighborhood was the Schildersweg, with very poor people, and there, with an initiative of an American artist, she succeeded to motivate the people to grow vegetable on the gazon, der Rasen, what is that in English? On the meadows outside, and nobody believed that that could be a good approach, and the administration was against and so on. But it succeeded, and since a couple of years, these people are working together with their gardens outside of their flats, flats built in the 50s and 60s, and nothing special. So the approach to nature and that can be also an escape of these problems in the social problems.
Thank you, Helga. Thank you very much. Václav, would you like to tell us maybe about Prague? What do you wish for, or do you want to tell us about Vienna? You can decide. So.
Well, my impression from this discussion was that actually the debate and the discourse about climate change and its consequences is really very developed in Vienna, comparing to, for example, the former post-socialist countries. Like, we are struggling with even admitting there is any climate change happening, and this actually means what I think which it should mean to Vienna is, and I don't want to repeat myself, but Vienna has to take this as a sign of the state that if there should be some leader in terms of really progressive measures and innovative solutions, it will be most probably Vienna. And this means speaking both about the bottom-up or top-down strategies. These actually have to communicate together in some sort of dialectical way. Like the local civic initiatives actually have to demand the solutions and negotiate with the representatives. And on the other hand, the leading persons of the city should use their both economical and expert or symbolic capitals to motivate and help the locals in making the changes happen. And in terms of, well, or in the context of climate change, I think like enough is never enough. So I think this is the biggest task for Vienna, to actually take this role of a leader in making this kind of progression as some kind of positive example also for the other countries and cities.
Thank you so much. So Vienna should not to over-regulate anymore, and let people also, and support also people who are activists and trying to put more into it. And I will take that with us tonight. I would like to sum up and wrap up because just to remind you, we also invited tonight Susanne Formanek and Erik Meinharter. And this is also very, they also, the work that they do on site is also very interesting and a huge contribution. So I invite you also to look into these projects like Grün statt Grau, Lila for Green, especially also about how science, how the city can support people when they are active in a very high density, dense city area, and how can we work together, like Lila for Green, or also what kind of about education, about green surfaces from projects from Grün statt Grau. But in the end, I also think that this is a really not only a social issue, it's a societal issue, because at the end we also have to rethink how our society works. How much do we work Do I have time to take care of urban gardening? Does my neighbor have time? So it is very much also coming back to the whole society and all the mechanism, also connected to the poverty, also connected who has the luxury of free time and urban gardening, and who has to take the car through the still not build the tunnel and work in the city and spend, I don't know, 1 hour here and there. So it is this subject is really very much connected also to our society. It goes really deep into society. It's just not, it's not only about planting the vegetables. And I hope that will stay for us and for the many years in order to get better visions and innovations and to also learn from other cities. So thank you very much. And I hope I'll see you also at some other events by ResearchLab, but also by IBA Vienna. And I hope you'll find time to look into our exhibition. We are open every day except of Sunday and Monday. Thank you very much.